This is The Fabulist. I'm Joel Pilger, and I'm diving deep into the intersection of creativity and commerce with little more than my curiosity and a microphone. Along with my generous collaborators at Coop Studios, I'm traveling the world to gather all the insights that studio leaders need but are way too busy to grasp. I'm talking to the motion makers, the fable finders, the storytellers. If you're running a disruptive enterprise in motion or animation, live action, sound or music, experiential, I'm here to celebrate you for not merely participating in the industry, but for reinventing it. Because the future isn't just coming at us, it's being created. So let's get after it. Well, first of all, how's life? How's family? How's Texas?
Everything's good, man. I'm a little overcommitted through September, so I'm stressing this month. I got some travel and doing half res. Have you ever been to half res before in Chicago?
I haven't. I was thinking about going because I saw you were going to be there, and I was like, man,
yeah.
I'm actually here right now for Camp MoGraph.
Where is here? In Chicago?
Yeah.
Oh, that's awesome. I didn't know it was, I totally missed. So when you posted that picture, I didn't realize that was from Chicago. That's awesome that you have your own bar. It's like a dream come true.
Not fun.
I love it, man. That's awesome. Well, if you're there, it'd be cool to see you. I also know things, life happens. That'd be a long time to stay in Chicago, I guess.
Well, remind me, is it next Friday?
Yeah. What is that, 20th, I think? Yeah.
Yeah, what? I just bought a ticket to Pictoplasma in New York, so I'm going to be doing that for 2 days with a couple of my homies that are in town. So
that's a great conference. Yeah, we're doing some portfolio reviews for Pictoplasma. I haven't been to the one in New York, or I haven't been to any of them in at least 10 years, but it was great the last time I went. I'm sure it's still awesome.
Yeah, I've never been, so I'm stoked to see what it's all about. All right, so what did you think of my questions?
I love them. So because of the half-res talk, this is like basically exactly what I'm trying to talk about next week. So I have some thoughts, as always.
You?
If there's a microphone in the room.
I love it, dude. So here's since we're recording, just know that anything is fair game. So we'll just keep going and it'll just turn into a conversation.
Okay, cool.
When did Half-Res approach you to speak?
Actually, last year, Mike reached out from Half-Res and I wasn't available for whatever reason. And he said, okay, I'll reach out next year. And he did. And so I felt, okay, I need to make it happen this year. And I love Chicago. So any chance to go to Chicago, I'm like, let's do it.
So how often are you speaking a lot these days? And is it like broader industry type stuff? Give us your observations from Justin's rarefied air perspective.
I'd like to be speaking more. Honestly, if I could just do speaking, that would be great. I don't think that's a job. But I love the challenge of trying to make observations that are relevant and actionable. I like the mental challenge of that. And it forces me to talk to people and have conversations and think through ideas. And it's really good for my kind of day-to-day work of what I'm doing at Buck, too. It gives me like great perspective. I like that. Speaking forces me to do that more than anything else. But I'm not doing a ton of it. I've probably done more hosting and emceeing than I have speaking. I think part of the problem is that my title at Buck is Executive Director of Communications. That's a new title.
Okay.
And anybody who has communications in their title, typically that's not the person who does the talking, unless you're talking about like the White House press secretary or something like that. The communications people are the conduit for speaking to other people at the company.
The catalyst.
And it's interesting is in my latest review with the partners, they were like, we want you speaking more. You should represent the company more. And I'm like, oh, it's kind of tricky for people to feel comfortable doing that, partially because of my title. So I don't know if I need to change my title or have an alternate title or something so that people feel a little more comfortable reaching out. Because one of the advantages of being at Buck and residents, our parent company, is that we have kind of an interesting perspective now on the industry. Obviously, it's always limited. Everybody's perspective is limited. But because of the fact that we're around the world and we have so many people and we do so many different kinds of work, and in some ways we're the canary in the coal mine too. Like if things are going to be bad, we may feel it first, at least in some cases. I always have ideas, always have thoughts that I want to bounce off. And what I like about talking to you is we agree on a lot of things. You talk to so many other people that, you have a lot of evidence or anecdotes from people that might even run counter to things that I'm saying. And I love that. That's great. Like, I don't want to be right. I just want to talk about this stuff in the open so we can all learn from it,
Yeah. Well, so I'm wondering, should we create a new title for you right here live?
What do you think? What would work? What?
To me, it's in the category of ambassador.
Oh, okay. Ambassador. I like that.
Or
little flags for my car and like a special license plate.
Right? No, but I think it is interesting because you're right. When I hear communications, I do think, that's somebody who is a catalyst and facilitates and makes communications happen. But yeah, it is kind of interesting because you're in this, I don't know, I don't want to date you and age you, but you do have this perspective that is somewhat of a more elder position, right? Like in a way,
Elder statesman. Yeah.
you and I have both kind of been through like the first season, the second season, the third season,
Yeah.
and each of those might be close to a decade in this industry. So we do have some opinions.
You have knowledge of this period that I'm so interested in. It's right before and during the big revolution of the early 2000s. You were so in the middle of that. You really saw what desktop computing and the software changes that happened in the early 2000s. You really saw what that did to the industry. And I came in like towards the end of that, really. I was in the early 2000s. And so there's this big gap I have in my knowledge, my experience that I really want to fill in. Sometime you and I are going to I'll have to pay you to be my private professor or something, because
teach you about
there's a whole bunch of stuff. Yeah.
The democratization, as I call it.
Yes. Yeah. Which usually when people talk about democratization in any field, but especially in ours, it's often always like an unqualified good. And I'm like, no, there's always a dark side of democratization. Actually, we can maybe talk about that later, but there's always somebody that's going to lose when things are democratized. And there's also risk involved with democratization as well that people don't talk about. And so that's a whole topic unto itself that I bet you have a lot of ideas about.
Well, in a way, I think we're going to maybe tangentially talk on some of this today because I feel really lucky that I crafted a few questions and things that I wanted to talk about today. And you were saying, hey, this actually jives really well with what I'm going to be speaking about at HalfRes. What is HalfRes for anybody that doesn't know what that is?
Yeah. HalfRes is a pretty long-running event now in Chicago that is part party and social event, but also part industry summit. And they always have interesting speakers. I've never been, but I'm excited.
So you're interesting now.
It skews towards the kind of CG and 3D side, but now I think that it's pretty diverse. And just funny because I always joke that like if I was actually talented, I probably would be working in 3D. I love 3D. That was my first kind of real love in the space, and so I'm excited to meet a lot of basically my heroes at the event, and hear them speak. So yeah, it looks like it's going to be a great time.
I have a great excuse that I can't make it, but I'm super bummed because there's a bunch of friends that I'm like, oh man, I want to see him and her and so forth. And I am actually here in Chicago right now for Camp MoGraph, ironically. But so can you share like the top line? Do you have a title for your talk?
Yeah.
What's the top line?
The title of my talk is, I've never been sailing, but I'm going to use a sailing metaphor throughout this entire talk. That's the title of my talk. It's a state of the industry talk. I know that I'm going to be speaking to a lot of artists who just want to make cool shit. And they don't want to hear about industry trends. And so I'm trying to make this relevant to them. And the metaphor that I introduce is, imagine, you don't have to close your eyes, but I'm going to close my eyes. Imagine you're a sailor. You're a Victorian sailor. It was before GPS, before iPhone, right? And you're blindfolded, okay? And you're at sea, but you're blindfolded. So you can go anywhere you want. But with that blindfold on, you have no idea what's going on around you. If there's a storm and the ocean starts to rise around you and toss your boat about, you're not going to even see that storm coming. Are you going to be prepared for it? Are you going to even survive even the simplest of storms? What if a kraken reels its head out of the water and decides to attack your ship? Or what if another ship comes along and wants to join forces? You're not going to see any of it, right? Because you don't think that, now I can graduate from the metaphor here, you don't think it's important, right? You don't think the industry trends matter. The things that are out of your control don't matter. You just want to make cool shit. You just want to make cool graphics or whatever. That's fine, but know that there are consequences for that. So I'm trying to get people to care a little bit about what's going on in the macro kind of world out there, because it does matter. And even if all you want to do is make cool shit, which I totally respect, which is I dream really, that may get taken away from you if you're not looking out a little bit around you and paying attention to what's happening in the industry. That's the point of my talk. I'm trying to reach people. And then, there'll be some other people who are studio owners or whatever, and they probably are going to have different ideas about what I'm saying about the industry. So yeah, that's the general idea. And I first have to define even what an industry is. And that was hard because I was like, is there even such a thing as like the motion design industry? And the truth is, no, not really. It's a field. It's a field. And because it's a field, it overlaps other industries.
Yep.
But we don't talk about the state of the field or field trends. So it just sounds weird. So I'm just going to say industry, and we can just ignore the fact that it's not the perfect term.
Yeah.
I think we all agree that like motion design is still a thing, and we understand what it is. We know that it's a many-headed hydra, that it does have a shared body. and we all still care about it. I don't know why or how after 25 years of being in and around motion design, I'm just as excited about it today as I was in 2002 and 3 when I first started learning about it. I still love it. And I think a lot of the people that are going to be at this event love it. Hopefully a lot of people listening to this still love it. And I want to talk to those people.
So it's funny, I'm so tempted to steal your thunder from the conference, but I have to, of course, let you go give your talk. But I'm bringing maybe a few specific thoughts that I feel like if I can maybe get into a few specific things that are probably very related to this topic, I think that I would also be wise, because otherwise this will be a 3-hour podcast.
Yeah.
Right?
Great. Let's focus for sure.
All right. So bear with me as I go into some really specific, we're going there now. So one thing that I think is a trend that I'm very curious to get your perspective on is what we're going to call the brands. Okay? Because traditionally, all the studios and production companies in our space, we all used to work for agencies, and then a lot of us work for entertainment, and then, right, those adjacencies, right, sports and things like this. Now, there's this thing happening out in the world with brands, where brands are now in-housing, and everyone's talking about in-housing, which is building creative teams, departments, agencies internally. And this is, in a way, the brands bypassing the traditional, maybe holding companies and agencies who produce creative and strategy and all this on their own. And I'm just curious, do you think this is going to impact more and more the studio model, the studios in our field? There's that word.
There you go.
Right? Like, how is this hunger for talent that I know all these brands have, it can be satisfied by, we're going to in-house and create teams and agencies and whatever in our own walls. But we're also just going to reach out and maybe go right at some of these studios and creative partners. Do you see this as a trend? Is this a thing?
In my opinion, this is the single biggest thing kind of shaping our field or our industry right now. And it has a lot of ripple effects. It's connected to other trends as well. I just think it's massive. The trend of in-housing has been going on, at least in the advertising and marketing space, for a while, and you could argue it's been happening for 100 years or something, but it's really been getting serious over the last 10 or 15 years. The way I like to think of it is, I remember back when Google launched Google Creative Labs, and this was around, 2010, 11, 12, something like that. And this was their kind of big first attempt that I can remember of doing in-housing, right? Of creating their own in-house agency. It was very ambitious because they wanted to reach across so many different areas, so many different channels. And I remember, like Google typically does, they threw a lot of money at it initially, and they got some stuff right and they got a lot of things wrong. But now fast forward, and they have some of the best in-house creatives out there. Google has an amazing in-house, or several in-house teams. And other people have figured it out too. I mean, Apple has an incredible in-house team. Basically, all the big tech giants have figured it out, right? And they've seen the value in it. They had the vision and the financial commitment to do it. It's not easy to do in-housing. A lot of, especially smaller places, try it and fail. And one of the reasons it's hard is it's really hard to attract the best talent out there, especially if you're trying to do production in-house. Let's say you want to do motion graphics in-house, right? Now you want to attract the best motion designers out there and best art directors and creative directors and all that. And it's hard because when they come in, they're all excited, but then they realize, I'm working for one client. It's a monoculture, it's one client. And most of us in the field, we're ADHD, shiny object people, and we get a little bored. That's why I didn't stay at Apple. Apple offered me a job back in 2007 as a motion designer, and I turned it down because I was like, I gotta go live in New York and scratch some itches. So it's hard to keep people in-house, but some people have figured it out and they've done really well. The reason I think it's such an important factor for our industry, well, as you pointed out, it's destroying the old legacy agency model, right? And the writing's been on the wall for agencies for a while, and they've also been trying to build up their own production capabilities and failing for a lot of the same reasons, culture reasons, those kinds of things, that it's hard to create in-house agencies. The writing's been on the wall for a while, but we've reached a tipping point. You can just hit Ad Age on any day and you'll see about how much in-housing is hurting the advertising world. What that means is, to put it really bluntly, if you're a studio that relied on agencies for the majority of your work, buckle up. You're probably already feeling it, right? This year in particular has been like a real turning point, I think. It's been getting harder and harder to find the work that you maybe used to rely on. When I was at PsyOp about 10 years ago, or 95% of our work came from agencies. And that's because we did a lot of 30-second spots and 60-second spots. And agencies are great at selling that creative through and doing the media buys for the Super Bowl ads. But as we know, that world is dying, if not dead, right? It's clinging to the linear TV model that's still powered by sports and news. But everything else is happening on the web and on social media. And there, the ad formats are totally different. They're much smaller ad formats, 15 seconds, 10 seconds, 5 seconds, still images that just fly by when you're scrolling through Instagram. So in-housing then becomes attached to another phenomenon that is, I think, mostly negative for our world, and that is the move towards performance marketing. So we can define performance marketing as a strategic emphasis on advertising that's measurable and advertising that's usually paid for by action. So somebody clicks on something or they convert and they buy something, you only pay for that, right? You can contrast that with higher funnel advertising, which would just be like brand awareness advertising, right? And that's what drove the whole like early 2000s of motion design, was driven by just these amazing brand campaigns. You get somebody saying, hey, we want a 60-second spot that basically just says how cool IBM is, or how cool Apple is, or how cool whatever is, fill in the blank. And motion design studios were like, shit, yeah, this is awesome. And we had carte blanche, big budgets, and we could just do whatever we wanted. Well, with this in-housing phenomenon and this emphasis on performance marketing as a follow-on to that, that stuff's really hard to measure. How do you measure the impact of brand awareness campaigns? You know, we'll keep doing that a little bit, but let's focus on this whole social media thing, because we can hyper-target every single ad to every single person in America or the world, and then we can tailor disposable content to those people, blah, blah, blah. And what gets lost, what gets left behind in all that? Creative, right? The creative is important, but it's tertiary at best. What's really important is the conversion. Is it happening? Is the ad giving me my ROI on my spend? I do think that pendulum has swung about as far as it can swing. And I think we're going to come back to an awareness on the client side that, oh shit, branding actually does matter. Differentiation matters. Emotion matters. Storytelling matters. And a lot of that's getting lost with this overemphasis on performance marketing. This all trickles down to studios having to grapple with this reality that in-housing in some ways is an opportunity. Okay, great. We get to, now maybe we should go directly to the brands. We can talk to them. We get a seat at the table. Everybody always wants a seat at the table, right? You have more, in theory, you have more creative control, more influence now as a studio if you're working directly to brand. There's no agency in the middle, no game of telephone, no watering down of your awesome creative ideas, right? That's the good stuff in theory, right? You have to have some skill set in order to pull that off. At the same time that's happening, those same clients are asking for scale. They want so much stuff because they're so obsessed with performance marketing, right? So they want tens, hundreds, sometimes thousands of deliverables, maybe over the course of a long period of time, in order to keep feeding this performance marketing machine. And that is soul crushing for most studios and most shops. It's a race to the bottom, right? So these two realities are coexisting. The one reality of this great potential of being at the table and having more influence than ever, and then also racing to the bottom. I don't know. Do you see it that way? Do you agree with that take?
Well, I do. And it's funny. I've been on the inside of this now for, I don't know, a little over 20 years. Okay. Because I'll just call it lucky when my studio started doing big project work directly for a telecom brand. And we mostly did work direct to brand back when it was not even really a thing. But what was interesting was we would be working with internal creative services departments. And it was very much like you described. The people were often frustrated because they were a very reactive appendage of upper management. And so, you know, from the CMO on down, it was like, do this, do that, do this other thing. And because they didn't have independent agency, let's use that word, they were very much just the extension of button pushing, right? And I don't mean to disparage their work and their contributions.
Yeah.
And this is what I'm curious to ask you about. This interesting dynamic of as soon as a brand in-houses something, then in a way, sometimes they kill the very thing that they're trying to get.
So good.
Because I've seen,
so true.
Yeah, like I've seen some actual studios get bought because we're going to bring all these talented people in-house. And you look around a year later and the culture is gone, the energy is gone, the ideas are gone because you killed the very thing that you wanted.
Yes.
So I'm curious to get your take on why is it actually critical for this independence variable to be in the mix, where a brand says, hey, creative service department, we want you to do X, Y, and Z. And they say, you know what? Whether we're too busy or some other reason outside of our expertise or something, we think it's best for us to go out of house.
Yeah.
Why? What are those advantages? Because that's where we want to hang out.
Yeah. I have a great quote on this topic from a recent article in Ad Age about in-housing. And they were covering a survey that was recently done with CMOs. And 83% of respondents said that in-house was better than outsourcing from a cost perspective. 83% said better from a cost perspective. However, 61% of respondents said outsourcing was better for creative quality. So they're admitting here, right? Yes, in terms of controlling costs, we want to in-house. But in terms of better creative, we need to go out of house at least some of the time, maybe a lot of the time. And this is where, I don't know, it was through luck or it was through strategy or what, Buck positioned itself a while ago at the beginning of this whole kind of in-housing thing and started working with brands directly. And it has been the saving grace for us. So if you look at something like the Airbnb work we've done, if you've seen any of the Airbnb ads that are these 3D ads where it looks like isometric view of a hotel room or whatever. So we did all those, right? And we've done a lot of other work in that same vein. There's no agency involved. It's us working directly with Airbnb's in-house team, who's amazing. Their team is super smart, incredibly strategic, and yet they reached out to us, to Buck, and if you're smart about in-housing, you're smart about how you're running your house teams, you want occasionally somebody to come along and do something that you just would never do on your own, something that you would never think of doing, right? Somebody that's going to throw a curveball that still fits with your strategy. And that's not a knock on the in-house teams. That's all of us. We all have our own blind spot. When Buck wants to rebuild our own website, right? We have the in-house chops to build our own website. We're not going to do it ourselves. We're going to hire somebody outside to do it. Actually, we're hiring somebody in our residence network to do it. But because we know that we have these blind spots, we need somebody to challenge us. We need somebody to do something unexpected. And then we respond to that. Now, what happens is if you're one of these studios who gets a crack at this, right? And somebody comes to you and like, hey, you know what? We think maybe, you could help us out here. We've got this big in-house team, but we want some out there creative. The challenge then becomes for the studios that are in that position to be smart, to not go straight to, oh shit, awesome. I'm going to make the coolest, craziest thing you've ever seen. I'm going to drop some acid and then we're going to just get crazy and here, check it out. You need to actually take the time to understand what their business challenges. And a lot of time they don't tell you this. They'll give you some like abbreviated BS version of it. Maybe in the brief, they hint at it, but you got it through conversations and through building relationships and trust. You got to tease out, well, what's actually going on? What is the real challenge? And to your question, ask them, why aren't you doing this in-house?
Yeah.
Get them to tell you why, because now with that information, then you can actually increase your chances of hitting it out of the park and doing it really well and building that trust and then getting more and more work with them. That's exactly what Buck has done over and over. And it's how we've become what we are. 70% of our work is direct to brand. And I do want to caveat, it's not 100% of our work that's direct to brand. And the agency work is still super important. It's super important. I'm not trying to throw the baby out with the bathwater, but getting that mix right for your studio and probably getting it to a higher ratio of direct to brand work is almost always a good idea. Almost always.
I appreciate you saying that because yes, I am also not here to dog on agencies because there's many good ones and they're brilliant and they're genius and so forth. The caveat I would say there is I find almost no large agencies are studios. They're not content studios. They are not makers and creators and crafters. And this is where I think a lot of them get into trouble because they do this big land grab. They kind of want all the business and then they're going to hand you and I a little piece of it. But anyways, I also just want to reiterate something that your bosses said when I had them on the podcast previously, and that was they acknowledged that in the early days, it was about 20/80 brand versus agency. Right?
Yeah.
So over the years, it's really significant. I want everybody to recognize like that is huge, especially the organization the size of a Buck, right?
Yeah.
That didn't just happen. So I'm sure there was a certain amount of intentional and purpose, but also reading the writing on the wall and the tea leaves. So let me ask this question, if I can maybe get it down to a really fine point. Because when you are an external partner, vendor, creative resource, that independence gives you something very subtle but powerful called the ability to say no.
Yeah.
which is not something that we threaten anybody with.
No.
But I'm just curious, when you think about the difference between internal, in-house, external, out of house, what is it about that independence that in a way preserves the magic that everybody wants out of this relationship?
Yeah. There's a bunch of different places you can say no, right? And they're all pretty valuable. No is always more powerful than yes. That's a lesson that took me a while to learn. And in terms of shaping your studio's future, your own future, no is always more powerful. Yes is easy, and yes gets you into trouble all the time as well, right? So I'm curious, just to put it back on you, when you say no, do you mean at the kind of outset of a project? Do you mean within, now you've won the project, now you're in it, and you're saying no to certain ideas? Where do you mean it?
I think I mean it in any place where in an in-house context, that response would be viewed as insubordination.
Yeah.
Okay, so that means for our English as a second language people, if you are in-house and your boss says, make the logo bigger, you say no, that's grounds for you're fired. That's disobedience, that's insubordination. If that's an external partner and you say, make the logo bigger, they might say, we don't concur. We don't agree, and let's have a conversation and talk this through and figure this out. There's just something incredible about that dynamic spread out from the very beginning of a project to all the way to the freaking 11th hour when the CMO at the last minute says, I really just don't like the color red. I mean, it shows up in a million ways, but I can't help but think this is part of just the basic fundamental reason that Ad Age article you referenced earlier. We want to save that money, but we also want great creative. And you can't have both. So you're going to push on one and it pulls on the other. It's like a water balloon, right? Like
totally.
It
comes down to expertise and trust, which is something you talk a lot about for good reason. And this has happened, I remember I worked in architecture for a hot minute, and everybody has an opinion about architecture because we live in built environment. We live in built spaces, right? Live in a house or work in an office, and that makes you an expert, right? No, it doesn't at all. And I realized that really fast when I was working at Gensler, because I sometimes would come up with an idea and I would say, let's put this giant LED wall in the lobby, and then I'll show you some really cool content we can put on there. It'll be great for the brand, blah, 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 blah. And 9 times out of 10, the people I'm working with would say, no. So why not? I'm the expert here on the brand. You hired me to talk about brand content and what's going to make an impact on these people. I'm like, yeah, but we're the experts on the built environment. And here's 18 reasons that's not going to work. Power consumption, heat, lighting, accessibility, and they would just go down the line. And I realized, oh shit, yeah, you're right. And 2 things would happen in that moment when they told me no and they backed it up. One is I respected them more. I already respected them as my colleagues, but I respected them more because I was like, oh, you know what? Yes, they are right. They are the experts here. I need to listen to that. And the other thing is I trusted them. And from that moment on, anytime that happened, we had a better working relationship, even though there was that tension because they said no. They rejected my idea. And sometimes I would spend a lot of time, money, and energy on something and it would get shot down. But I always was happy about that no. And I've seen it happen with clients too. Sometimes clients are really committed to an idea and they come in and our spidey sense goes off. We're like, pretty sure that's not the right idea. But let's step into this with them, with the client. Let's figure it out. Let's learn a little bit more. And then if we have to say no, we're going to say it and we're going to back it up just like my fellow architects did when I worked at Gensler. And it almost always makes the relationship better, makes the work better. Even if they ignore your no and they still, no, I still don't like red, or I still want red, whatever it is. There's that exchange that has happened and you've built that trust and you've deepened the respect mutually. And that I think is so valuable. I've come to think of trust as the other side of craft. The coin is 2-sided, right? All coins are 2-sided. One side is craft, the other side is trust. You can't really do one well without the other. And so anything you can do to increase trust with your client is going to be good in the long run. And saying no is weirdly a great way to do it. It's just a great way to do it.
So when you talk about craft and trust being 2 sides of a coin, is this one thing, but it's like a different point of view on the same thing?
The coin is the kind of relationship that you have with your client and the potential for it to become more. People have asked so many times, like, how did Buck get so big? How do you get these projects and all that? And it's a kind of land and expand model where we get whatever small project gets thrown our way and we kill it on craft. We're known for craft, right? So we go for craft. But a lot of people are good at craft, man. There's so many good studios and individuals out there who are, let's be honest, they're just as good. I wouldn't have said that maybe 10 years ago, but there are so many good people out there now. So craft is table stakes, really, right? So we would get thrown a project with a client and we kill it on craft. But then what we also kill it on is the overall client experience, which is basically trust. They give us this opportunity. We manage it well. We manage their expectations. We hit the deadlines. Whatever it is we have to do, we communicate well. And that's all on our production team, by the way, and our creative leads, but especially our producers. And that is just as responsible for our success and for that client coming back for repeat business or coming back and saying, hey, I've got a friend in another department. They want to work with you now because I had such a great experience with you. That has nothing to do with craft exactly. It's connected. The craft is kind of the vehicle for trust in that way. And so that's what I mean by this two-sided coin. They're really inextricably linked, craft and trust. But you have to deliver on both if you want to keep things going with that client and if you want to grow, not only within that client, but just as a business overall.
It's interesting because I'm thinking of the handful of people that I've gotten to know from Buck down through the years. And I will say, just in case anyone listening says, yeah, trust, I want to make sure that it's not being missed, because I've gotten the takeaway that the degree to which you and your colleagues take seriously that idea of trust, because that translates into process and method and really understanding how to take people through that and so forth. I have the sense that it's at a level that most people really have no understanding or maybe even appreciation of.
Yeah, we're obsessed with it. We had a leadership change. So the founders of the company, there's 3 founders, and 2 of them, Ryan Honey and Orion Tate, graduated from Buck, and they're focusing on residents, the parent company we set up a couple years ago. And in their wake, we needed new leadership. And so we have Emily Rickard, who is our CEO, and she came up through the ranks, started as a producer many years ago at Buck. And then we have Nick Carmen. He's our chief operating officer now, and he came up through the ranks as a producer as well. It's really interesting to me that those 2 folks came up as producers, right? And what I love about both of them, they're just incredible leaders, and we're really lucky to have them, both of them. But they are obsessed with process. They're obsessed with quality, they're obsessed with client experience, all these things, right? And they're also obsessed with all the business things that you have to be obsessed with, margins and all that crap that we don't like to talk about. But it's really kind of almost like a byproduct of being obsessed with process and being obsessed with quality control. And every time we deliver projects, like, how can we do it better? How can we do it better? Even when the client's super happy, how can you do it better? And that obsession over the course of the 20 years that Buck has been in business I think we're really good at it. It's hard to know because you don't know how everybody operates internally. Having worked at several other places, I can tell you it's the best I've seen. And I want people to understand how important that is. I've got a lot of friends who runs like small to mid-sized shops, and I tried to run a kind of a small shop myself for a little bit, and it's so challenging. Most of us, those shops are usually established by creative directors, people who want to make cool shit. And most of those people, myself included, are not excited about process, or at least the way we're talking about it. And they're not excited about asking for more money from clients, not excited about having those conversations. And so what happens usually is they just don't have the conversation. They don't ask for more money, and that basically is like a slow death is what that is, or a really long stagnation, which in my opinion is basically the same thing in the creative services industry. So the only solution that I can think of to this is get help. Find somebody who's good at it. Find somebody who isn't afraid to ask for more money, who doesn't mind having it. Some people like it, man. You'll be surprised how many people like asking for overages. That's a huge part of our business. A huge part of any successful business in creative services is demanding the money that you're worth and doing it in a way that's respectful and that the client appreciates a lot. I'm not good at it. Most people aren't. So find somebody who is, and then hire them, and then eventually put them in charge.
Yeah, I love that story, and especially that those 2 leaders are former producers.
Yeah,
I freaking love that. And I will also humorously say, hey, wait a minute. Don't dog on things like margin, man. We love talking about margin around here on this podcast.
Okay, good.
Because obviously I'm a kindred spirit with you in this, and that is I have found in my own experience running my own studio, but of course working with a few hundred others now, that a mastery of the business side is truly the thing that unleashes the awesomeness of all your creative superpowers. And it also, of course, makes you sustainable and everything. So if you really want to have an impact in the world and have a great career, I find it's necessary. It just is.
That's the way to think of it. It unlocks so much. Our whole mission is to create a sustainable creative culture. And a lot of that means giving artists the opportunities to enrich themselves however they see fit, whether that's taking classes, working on games, doing weird experiments, doing figure drawing, whatever it is that gets them going, right? All that stuff costs money. It takes money and time. And so in order to create that sustainable creative culture, we need to be profitable. We need to be highly profitable in some cases because that stuff's expensive. And so the earlier you embrace that reality, the better off you're going to be. But it's hard. I mean, I'm not going to say it's easy. It's very hard for me. I do some freelance work and am terrible at costing my work. I'm like, we're friends. It's cool. Don't worry. It's fine. You know, I'm just like, I'm apologizing for asking for money. So I get it. Find somebody who's good at it.
So this question might take a minute to answer too. So it might actually be, right, like our kind of final point to get into, because you said a phrase earlier, like we've been talking about margin a little bit, right, just in the abstract. But you talked about this concept, race to the bottom, earlier, right? And I'm very curious just to get your perspective, especially, of course, from the buck world, because when I think about this trend, and I have to give credit to somebody on your team who exposed me to this concept called ephemeralization.
Yeah.
Love this word from Buckminster Fuller.
Buckminster Fuller, yeah.
But this idea of every year we're being asked to do more and more with less and less until we're eventually going to be asked to do everything for nothing. But this is the job, right? This is the path that you and I have been on for decades.
Yeah.
It will be the path for decades more. So once we get over that, but however, there is how do we get over that? Because it feels every year, man, especially with shit like AI going on, everyone's freaking out and going, oh my God, that whole ability to do everything for nothing, it's upon us. But Buck is still, last I checked, still strong. And there's a lot of shops that are somehow overcoming this. Do you have any thoughts on how do we continue to overcome this ephemeralization thing?
Yeah, because what it sounds like at face value is something's going to be taken away from you, is what it sounds like, right? The thing that you're doing now will be taken away because you're going to be part of that inevitable cutting of the input, right? But the output has to go up. One of the stories I like to think about is if you've ever seen Star Trek II, Wrath of Khan, awesome movie, 1982, I think is when it came out. It has, if I remember correctly, the first fully CG generated sequence in a big Hollywood feature film. And it's during a moment when this planet is being destroyed. They call it the Genesis sequence or something like that. And this planet's being destroyed. So you see this planet blowing up, but then being reborn. And it's this really elaborate sequence. It was done by Industrial Light and Magic back when Industrial Light and Magic was brand new. It was created by a team of computer scientists and artists. They wrote hundreds of thousands of lines of code and all sorts of stuff to make this happen, right? 1982, right? I found a video from a few years ago of the same sequence, but reimagined and with current CG, and it's gorgeous. Full HD, obviously, or 4K, whatever it was. Just this gorgeous sequence of the planet exploding and then being reborn, just like the original, but even more amazing. And it was done by one guy in his bedroom following a Houdini tutorial over the weekend. 2 days, something like that. And I thought, okay, does that mean that all those people in Industrial Light and Magic by 1982 are out of work now? No. They went on, they evolved over the course of 40 years or the ensuing 40 years. They evolved and did other things. And this guy who did it by himself has a totally different career path than they could have ever imagined. And it's not that something was taken away, it's that it was transformed. And it transforms over a longer period of time than you think. Wait, this stuff all seems like it's happening overnight. And generative AI is a great example. It feels like it just came out of nowhere, right? And it's like clobbering us. But if you've actually tried to use it in a production environment, especially if you're talking about video, it is so far from being the thing that it promises to be. Will it get there? Hell yes, it will. It will. But it's going to take longer than you think and longer than people are saying. And so during that time, we all have the opportunity to adapt. We all have the opportunity to decide, I'm going to take this fork in the road or that fork in the road. Nothing will be taken away from you overnight. It will feel like overnight if you put your head in the sand and if you decide this stuff sucks, I don't like it, and it's terrible, and I'm not going to do it. I'm just going to stick to the old ways. Then someday you will wake up and yes, something will be taken away from you. As they like to say, it's not AI that's going to take your job. It's somebody who knows how to use AI that will take your job, right? And there's a lot of truth to that. I understand that the ethical rock in a hard place this puts a lot of people, right? And I have ethical concerns too about the majority of the kind of generative AI out there because I don't agree with the way that these models were trained without consent from the artists and everybody else that was. Unfortunately, that genie is way out of the bottle. And it looks like there's no slowing down, no turning back. And so now here we are all together in this kind of ethical hellscape. And then we kind of go, all right, I could choose to just sit it out. And I do think that's very dangerous to do. What you can try to do is, when we're doing it, Buck, is try to say, what's the best possible way we can embrace this going forward? So we have a lot of rules about this. We have a policy that we will never, I would say never, who knows what's going to happen 10 years from now. But right now, we never are going to deliver something that was just generated out of AI. We use AI not to create more, faster, cheaper, although a lot of people, that's their goal. And okay, we can talk about that. We use AI to speed up the creative process and to give us new creative ideas. So we have some people who work full-time on AI, and we have one guy who you might know if you follow the field. His name is Nathan Shipley. He's amazing. He's a kind of a pioneer in that kind of like video side of AI, and he did some experiments. We have something called a homebrew AI club. So every now and then, everybody will get together and just share whatever they've been farting around with. And some people are super technical, like Nathan. He's using comfy UI and all these crazy cutting edge workflows. And then some people are like me. They're like, I went into Midjourney, I had this idea. Like, here it is. And so you get this whole gamut. He had created this experiment where he got a 3D model of a shoe, just a generic shoe. And then he started to imagine, what if this shoe was made out of leaves? Or what if it was made out of flowers? What if it was made out of lava? What if it was made out of whatever? And so he was using a very complicated workflow in order to generate these beautiful, really just objectively beautiful images and video sequences. And if we were to use that in production, we would say, oh, that is really cool. Let's give that to our CG team now. And they're gonna rebuild it, right? They're gonna be like, okay, that's cool. It's got some problems and it's really not ready to go as it is. And also we want to have more creative control. And so we're going to rebuild this in 3D. And in that process, they're going to make so many improvements and refinements and things. That's one of the ways that we're using AI. We use it in a lot of other ways too. But it's really about boosting creative possibilities, which benefits our client immensely because in a shorter period of time, they're getting either a wider range of creative possibilities or a deeper dive into a specific idea. Either way. We're not promising, and by the way, we're going to make you 1,000 of these and they'll be customized for every market around the globe and we could no, we're not interested in that. I know a lot of people are. That is a race to the bottom. And if you're running a shop and you think that's where you want to go, just be careful, man, because what's going to happen is over time, the creative kind of spark is going to go out. It's going to become about just churn. How many of these can you do, right? You got to be really careful and protect that. So that's what we're trying to do now. And that's a roundabout way of addressing this ephemeralization thing. It sounds crazy to do more for less, but it's not always bad. It can actually be weirdly liberating and fun because it forces you into these new ways of thinking about creativity and your workflow.
It's cool to hear you say, I would call it like this continue climb up the mountain, right? Fueled by curiosity. It's this willingness to run into the fire. Yeah. Seems crazy, but you're like, let's embrace this and see where this goes and explore. The alternative is, no, I'm going to ride the race to the bottom faster than everybody else. And I'm going to get there and I'm going to sell this commodity at such a scale that I'm going to get rich or something. But that's not a creative quest.
That's like a venture capital kind of Silicon Valley quest kind of thing. And that's fine, but it's not creative. You're right.
And it runs its course too.
Yeah.
Right? Like you do it. And then once you get there and you've created that commodity and it achieves equilibrium, everybody can buy it for next to nothing, or it's Spotify and every song is essentially free.
Yeah.
It's, we're done. Okay. But the other word I heard I'm going to go back to was is the alternative of this, like staying open and curious and aware, is the blindfold, right? It's going back to your
The sailing metaphor.
It's the sailing metaphor, right? Of this, like, you can keep the blindfold on, but at some point it won't serve you in your career.
Yeah.
That's what I heard.
I do believe that. I really do. And it's hard because I really sympathize with people who don't want any part of this, especially if you're an artist who's spent your entire career honing your craft and maybe developing a really specific style or something. And then this comes along. It's a gut punch. And it's, I don't want to discount that at all. And we talk about this a lot at Buck, but you've got to find a way to get through that or turn it into your advantage. And one of the ways to do that, I think, if you don't know what to do about it, is just start talking to other people about it. People who feel the same pain, but also know that they have to do, something to move forward. Don't isolate yourself, because that's a recipe for disaster. And I think, that'll put you on the path to find your own way through it.
Man. So this is the encouragement. Don't doom scroll. Get outside of your bubble. Yes. Like, I'm at Camp MoGraph, right? Yep. You're going to be at the conference. I've already forgotten the name.
Half-Res in Chicago.
Half-Res, thank you.
Yeah.
You'll be at Half-Res in Chicago.
And there's so many good events out there now. Just go to your events, man. Go to them. Whatever's local, whatever you can get to, go to it.
And little shameless plug, I appreciate having your voice inside Forum, the community that I run online, where there's a lot of owners that are being super
Forum.
real about the stuff that they're dealing with. So it's another way that we are like keeping the blindfold off.
Back in the early days when I was getting into this stuff, there was a really well-known message board called mograph.net. And that's how I learned about motion graphics, really, back in the early 2000s. And it was all these people who were at the very bleeding edge of the field at the time, and they knew everything about the industry. The industry was pretty small. And I was a lurker, and I created a website where I basically was just cataloging all the cool stuff that I saw on mograph.net. And that was called Tween, and then later it became Motionographer. Forum is like my new mograph.net, if I can be honest with you. I lurk in there.
I love that.
And I do participate too, but I lurk in there because it's so real. It's like, these are the people on the front lines in small to mid-sized shops, which is truly the lifeblood of our industry. The Bucks are so fun to look at and talk about and poke and make fun of and all that. But Buck isn't the industry. The industry is the small to mid-sized shops that are out there every day. And I love what you built there, because you've got a really nice collection. It seems to be growing all the time. There's always new voices coming in. So yeah, that's cool. Thank you for letting me hang out in there a little bit. It's great.
You earned the, of course, hall pass eternally.
Yeah, I love
right?
it.
So we're letting you lurk the halls anytime. But no, I appreciate having your voice in there. It's fantastic. I think people are often just very surprised and, oh, wow, here's Justin's chiming in. This is really freaking cool. So
that's fun.
Dude, I appreciate this conversation so much.
Thank you.
I'm going to say thank you and say signing off from Camp MoGraph. I'm sorry, I'm going to miss you at Half-Res a week from now.
Yeah.
You and I are still looking for that moment we're going to intersect.
We're passing ships at night.
On the planet.
We got to hang out in person soon.
I know, right? Well, at least we're not wearing the blindfold, right? We're passing ships.
True. That's right.
We got our blindfolds off.
Yeah.
No, appreciate you and appreciate your voice in the industry. And I am always just really grateful to have your point of view that you're so generous and willing to share with the rest of us. So thank you, sir.
Thank you for humoring me, man. I appreciate it. And letting me spout all this nonsense. Thank you so much.
Thanks for listening. And thanks to my collaborators at Coop Studios. To learn more about them, visit coopstudios.com. As for you, if you're focused on running a strong and thriving creative company, consider joining Forum, my private network of the world's leading studios. For details, go to joelpilger.com.